Trump administration sends Navy warships off the coast of Venezuela to confront Nicolas Maduro, the alleged head of the Cartel of the Suns. A triple murder in Bolivia linked to Europe's most violent cocaine war. All of that and much more on this week's edition of Organized Crime News Weekly. Welcome back to Organized Crime News Weekly. This is the weekly show where we discuss the goings-on in the global criminal underworld. Before I start, I just want to remind everyone to please like, share, and subscribe so we can help grow this channel. Also, please make sure to support my channel. You can do that by just contributing $2.99 a month. Any contribution is greatly appreciated, and it helps me to continue making these videos. At the end of each video, I will give a shout out to each individual who contributes. Tensions between the United States and Venezuela have increased dramatically in recent weeks, all due to the allegations by the U.S. that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is the head of the Cartel of the Suns, an alleged cocaine trafficking cartel made up of leaders of Venezuela's military generals. In 2020, federal prosecutors in Manhattan charged Maduro and top Venezuelan officials with narco-terrorism and conspiracy to import cocaine into the United States. This escalation of tensions started on July 25th when the Cartel of the Suns was designated a terrorist organization by the Treasury Department and also claimed by the Americans to be strongly linked to the Sinaloa cartel, which Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has denied and stated that there is no evidence to support these allegations. Then on August 7th, both the Department of State and Justice Department announced that they were offering a reward of $50 million for information leading to the arrest of Maduro. And then on August 13th, the United States confiscated more than $700 million in assets belonging to Maduro, which includes several million-dollar homes in Florida, luxury cars, 2 private jets, and a mansion in the Dominican Republic known as Villa La Caracola. And finally, on August 18th, President Trump ordered that 3 Aegis-guided missile destroyers, the USS Gravely, USS Jason Dunham, and USS Sampson, be deployed off the coast of Venezuela, along with 4,000 sailors and Marines being deployed to the southern Caribbean region. The 3 Navy ships are expected to arrive in the region over the next few days. A U.S. official has stated that more military assets will be committed to the region, such as P-8 spy planes, additional warships, and at least 1 attack submarine. It was further stated that the naval assets will not just be used to carry out intelligence and surveillance operations, but also as a launching pad for targeted strikes if a decision is made. President Maduro has not taken this news of U.S. intimidation well, as you might imagine. On Monday, he announced on state television that he would be deploying 4.5 million militia members across Venezuela in response to the Americans. Maduro also called on his political base to form militias made up of peasants and workers in all industries. So things have obviously heated up with Venezuela. Trump administration has placed a heavy emphasis on going after drug cartels since he came back into office earlier this year. This also comes the same week that he announced that he will possibly be deploying troops into Mexico to combat the cartels. It remains to be seen if that'll actually happen. And the Trump administration has placed a heavy emphasis on targeting Maduro and Venezuela, as they believe that Maduro's regime, as well as propping up Tren de Aragua, who the right-wing media in the United States have claimed is invading the United States. They also claim that he works with gangs like Tren de Aragua and the Sinaloa cartel to funnel cocaine into the United States, causing disruption. This is despite observers of organized crime in Latin America claiming that the Cartel of the Suns, rather than being an organization that engages in cocaine trafficking activities directly, instead receives money in the form of bribes from actual cocaine trafficking organizations to look the other way. But the Trump administration wants to frame the Cartel of the Suns as being the orchestrators of the cocaine flowing from Venezuela into the United States. Can't honestly say I know what's going to happen, especially being that this is the Trump administration we're talking about. I don't think any direct confrontation with Venezuela or Maduro will do any good. The Trump administration just wants to think that strong force will be able to combat drug trafficking instead of looking at the real issues of why people go into drug trafficking and why some states are propped up by it, like Venezuela. Even if the U.S. were to take direct action against Maduro, it would do absolutely nothing to stop the flow of cocaine in South America to the United States. But obviously the Trump administration is going to frame it however they want to. And if they do take action against Maduro, they'll obviously claim some sort of victory, even though the long-term effects may be even more harmful to Venezuela than the current circumstances in the country. In the early morning hours of August 15th, a woman was shot dead in the northern part of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Her body was found by police wrapped in a blanket with gunshot wounds to the head and chest. The woman was soon identified as Eweline Passos Rodriguez, also known as the Blonde Devil. This comes just a month after she was sentenced to death by members from the rival Commando Vermelho, or Red Command, faction after a confrontation on July 10th. She was a member of the Terceiro Comando Puro, or Pure Third Command in English, one of the most powerful criminal groups in Rio de Janeiro that for a number of years now has been engaged in a brutal conflict with the more powerful Commando Vermelho over control of favelas across the city for the right to control drug sales and extortion in the neighborhoods. The TCP is believed to be in alliance with the Primeiro Comando de Capital, First Capital Command, or PCC, the most powerful criminal organization not only in Brazil, but arguably in South America, that is one of the main orchestrators of large cocaine shipments to Europe. The group has adopted the image of being heavily influenced by evangelical Christianity in its ideology and claims to be cleansing the favelas of their rivals. The group leverages religion to help draw a devoted support network, as well as to attract recruits, and dubs the favelas they control the Israel complex. They have even adopted the flag of Israel as their symbol, and evangelical Christianity has gained a huge following in Brazil in recent years. So it's no surprise they would use that to their advantage. But it appears to me that this is only a PR stunt in order to whitewash their image. The woman murdered this past week, Eweline Passos Rodriguez, was wanted by the Rio de Janeiro Civil Police on charges of drug trafficking and being involved in a criminal organization. She had only just become involved in criminal activity in the last couple of years. Originally from the Brazilian state of Santa Catarina, in 2022, she was the victim of domestic violence when she was shot by her ex-partner, resulting in a punctured lung. Before this violent incident, she had been a married mother of two, making a living by selling products such as perfume and makeup on social media, as well as selling chocolate truffles to pay her way through law school. In the immediate aftermath of being attacked by her ex-partner, she fled to Rio de Janeiro and promptly joined Commando Vermelho. She would subsequently gain a huge following on social media where she would pose with high-caliber weapons. In one post, she addressed the police stating, quote, "I won't surrender alive, I'll only leave in a coffin." In 2023, she was arrested for transporting 7 kilos of cocaine, and just this past June, even engaged in a shootout with police officers. In the past few months, she switched sides and joined Terceiro Comando Puro and was immediately targeted for murder by her former faction. Just last month, Passos Rodriguez made a video where she claimed that members of Commando Vermelho had tracked down and murdered her mother. And after her murder this past week, it was determined that the suspect in her death is a member of Commando Vermelho that goes by the nickname of TH da Penha. And to add insult to injury, after murdering Passos Rodriguez, he released an intimate video of her online that had been filmed while she was still a member of Commando Vermelho. But this is a pretty tragic story, considering that just a few years ago, she seemed to be a pretty normal person, and then she got sucked into crime when it appeared that she had nowhere else to turn, and now she is dead from this tragic turn of events. This seems to be the case with a lot of people in Brazil. They get sucked into the gang lifestyle due to financial circumstances or the neighborhood they may even live in. And these gangs like Commando Vermelho and Terceiro Comando Puro control a lot of these favelas, quite literally, with the Brazilian government unable to intercede in the affairs of these favelas. And this has been going on for decades now, all across Brazil, especially in the big cities like Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. And it's because of gangs like the Commando Vermelho and the Terceiro Comando Puro that Brazil is one of the most murderous countries in the world, as these gangs are always trying to invade each other's favelas and take control of them. Someone who follows this stuff every day, it seems like almost every day or every other day, there's someone from one of these factions murdered in a dispute between themselves or being shot down by the police. Eweline Passos Rodriguez is just another casualty of the murderous Brazilian drug wars that have plagued Brazil for decades now, and the violence between Commando Vermelho and Terceiro Comando Puro will only continue as these groups are hell-bent on destroying one another and controlling drug trafficking in Rio de Janeiro. Georgian businessman Georgi Makads has been arrested for ordering the murder of gangster Levon Zangviladze, which occurred last March in Tbilisi. He was arrested along with two other individuals, one of whom purchased the weapons used in the murder, with the other being accused of giving false testimony to cover up the crime. Makads is accused of orchestrating the murder of Zangviladze along with his brother David, who has been charged in absentia as he is not currently in Georgia. Makads is said to have ordered Zangviladze's murder due to, quote, various issues related to business activities. Georgi Makads has very powerful connections amongst the Georgian elite. He is said to be a close associate of Otar Hartzgaladze, Georgia's former prosecutor general, who has been sanctioned by the United States for allegedly acting in the interests of Russia, and he in turn has been accused of engaging in violence and extortion on behalf of Georgian oligarch and politician Bidzina Ivanishvili, founder of the Georgian Dream Party, which has ruled Georgia since 2012, and the Georgian Dream Party overall is said to be acting in the interests of the Russian Federation, and this has led to many of the protests the past year in Georgia due to the government not allowing entry into the EU despite protests from its citizens. But let's get back to the murder case. Levon Zangviladze, the man that Georgi Makads is accused of having had murdered, was the right-hand man of his brother Merab Zangviladze, as well as being the brains behind his operations. Merab is a thief-in-law and holds considerable weight in the post-Soviet underworld. A thief-in-law is a member of the criminal fraternity known as the Thieves-in-Law, or in Russian, the Vorvisakonia. Thieves-in-laws are esteemed members of the post-Soviet underworld who live by a strict code of not collaborating with the authorities and not abiding by society's rules in any way. The Zangviladze brothers expanded heavily into Russia in the 1990s and 2000s and came into conflict with two of Russia's most powerful mobsters, the notorious Vyacheslav Ivankov, also known as Yaponchik, and fellow Georgian Aslan Yusoyan, also known as Ded Hassan. To combat Ivankov, they teamed up with another Georgian and powerful thief-in-law, Tariel Oniani, and are said to have been responsible for both Ivankov's and Yusoyan's assassinations in 2009 and 2013, respectively. Merab in recent years has relocated to Italy, while Levon remained in Russia, residing in Moscow and looking after his brother's interests. When Levon was murdered back in March, he had come to Tbilisi, Georgia to attend the funeral of a friend and business partner. He was shot dead on the evening of March 14th as he was leaving the wake, along with his personal driver being wounded in the attack. The shooter was arrested a couple days later and was identified as a man by the name of Gela Udzilari. Both of the Makads brothers, the brothers who are accused of orchestrating the murder of Levon, have long been rumored to have ties to the criminal underworld, and both have been accused of being involved in business extortion schemes. David Makads, the one who has not been captured yet, he was part of a group of men who attacked protesters during a pro-EU demonstration in Tbilisi last December. As I mentioned earlier, these protests were against the Georgian government, ruled by the Georgian Dream Party, which is thought to be very pro-Russian and anti-EU. Georgian Dream Party officials and their associates have recently been caught up in a wave of internal purges and retribution against one another, and the thieves-in-law are thought to have gained much influence with Georgian authorities in recent years. The thieves-in-law are said to have gained even more influence due in part to the declining legitimacy of the Georgian government, which has led to some members of the business community, as well as civilians, turning to the gangsters to mediate disputes. The Georgian government is said to often utilize the gangsters to influence elections in their favor, as well as maintaining control over the prison populations, as in prisons the thieves-in-law are seen as the ultimate authority figures, and in turn the influence that the thieves-in-law are allowed in the Georgian government allows them to carry on criminal activities such as extortion, blackmail, and drug trafficking. But it seems that gangsters are increasingly making their presence felt in Georgia, and it seems that much of the Georgian elite is complicit in their rise. Georgian oligarchs and politicians utilizing the gangsters to carry out vendettas and sabotage against their political and business opponents. Sounds very similar to how the gangsters operate in Russia, where politics, business, and organized crime very often collude with one another. Not surprising considering the Russian influence in the Georgian government. But I thought this story was interesting because it shows this interconnectedness between the Georgian elite and organized crime. And this also comes to light at a time when tensions in Georgia are particularly high due to fears of Russian meddling in the country's affairs. Also, the murdered man at the center of this case, Laban Zongvalaz, was obviously a very powerful figure. His brother Merab is most assuredly going to seek revenge for this murder, so this could lead to a very interesting situation in Georgia. It could possibly ignite a wave of violence between criminal factions in the country, but that remains to be seen, and we shall see what happens in the future. 3 bodies were discovered wrapped in black plastic bags in a house back on August 8th in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. The bodies of the 3 men showed signs of torture, with items such as hammers and baseball bats being used to torture the 3 individuals before they were executed with gunshots. They were found in the kitchen of a rented house where neighbors had reported hearing music and screams coming from the room and subsequently alerted the Bolivian authorities. 4 individuals were arrested soon after, with 2 vehicles being seized along with ammunition, and these men are believed to have carried out the executions. During interrogations, they have not denied that they knew the victims and have been ordered to be detained for 180 days. It has since been determined that the 3 executed men were members of the Kavaч clan, a powerful cocaine trafficking group from Montenegro that for the past decade plus have been responsible for massive shipments of cocaine being shipped into Europe. For the past 10 years, they have been embroiled in a vicious war with the rival Scagliari clan, who they were once allied with. This has led to over 50 murders across Europe and South America. The murdered men have been identified as Marko Skrbic, Miljan Dekic, and Dejan Lazarevski, and it is thought that they were on their way to a meeting over a cocaine deal when they were killed. Croatian Marko Skrbic was found to have been carrying documents with a fake name. He had been living in Bolivia for the past few years, where he was responsible for coordinating cocaine shipments on behalf of the Kavaч clan, particularly to Slovenia. And Bolivia is one of the 3 countries that cocaine is produced from, along with Colombia and Peru. So it seems that the Kavaч clan was trying to control all aspects of the trafficking of cocaine directly from South America. But Skrbic was wanted on several arrest warrants in countries including in Slovenia, where he was said to have played a role in the murders of 2 other members of the Kavač clan after a large amount of cocaine went missing from a warehouse. One of those men was Daniel Bozic, who was kidnapped and tortured to death in 2019. And one of the other murders Skrbic was linked to was the murder of a Kavač clan member who was killed in Spain also in 2019. Skrbic was found to have been involved in these murders after the hacking of the SkyECC app, where he went under the name of Coco. Him and the 2 other men he was murdered with last week, Dekic and Lazarevski, are suspected of being linked to a 4.8-ton shipment of cocaine seized from a tugboat off the island of Martinique in the Caribbean just last month. All the crew members were from Balkan countries such as Montenegro, Croatia, and Serbia. As of now, it's unknown exactly what the motive is for the murder of these 3 men. If I were to guess, it is probably linked to the Kavač clan's war with the Scagliari clan. The feud between the 2 groups seems to have reignited in the past month or so, with members of both groups having been killed in the last couple months in Montenegro and Spain. There's also been a couple of attempted assassinations linked to this feud in recent months. But if I were to guess, this is probably the most likely reason that these 3 men were murdered, or else potentially they crossed some Bolivian-based drug traffickers, who knows. And I've also discussed before on the show how criminals from the Balkans are increasingly seeming to take over and dominate the cocaine trade, particularly from countries such as Albania, Serbia, Montenegro, and Bosnia. And these groups have members that are directly based in South America, dealing with Latin American cartels to transport the cocaine to Europe. The 3 men murdered in Bolivia this past week are perfect examples of that. This is just another violent chapter in the bloody Balkan drug wars, as Balkan criminals increasingly come to dictate the international cocaine trade. All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Organized Crime News Weekly. Thank you so much for tuning in. Special thanks to Julia Gates 4573 and the Green Beret Boxer 34 for contributing to this channel. I'll be back next week to report on more stories concerning the global criminal underworld. Thank you so much for tuning in.